At 6:47 a.m., Sheriff Daniel Monroe received a call he would never forget. The voice on the line was shaky, panicked, and kept repeating the same phrase over and over. "He's gone. He's just gone." The caller was Alice Wanders, a 27-year-old tourist from Oregon. She was standing on the edge of State Route 375, better known as Extraterrestrial Highway, the lonely road slicing through the Nevada desert near Area 51. An hour earlier, she and her younger brother, Tom, had parked there to watch the sunrise. Now, Tom was missing. Deputies arrived 22 minutes later. Alice's hands were trembling. She pointed toward a faint trail leading into the desert scrub. "He walked out that way. He said he just wanted a closer look." 10 minutes. That was almost an hour ago. They followed the trail. At first, it was easy, 2 sets of footprints pressed into the sand, Alice's when she'd walked with him a short way, and Tom's continuing deeper. After roughly 600 meters, the deputy stopped. The tracks ended. Clean. No drag marks. No sign of a turnaround. Just a pair of shoe prints facing southeast, toward the restricted zone, and then nothing. Like he evaporated, one of the deputies muttered. They marked the spot with orange flags and called in search and rescue. By 9 a.m., a helicopter circled overhead, scanning with thermal cameras. Nothing. By noon, the temperature climbed past 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Teams combed the area in grid formation. No backpack. No hat. No shoe. No Tom. And then came the detail that turned a simple search into a criminal investigation. One of the deputies reviewing dashcam footage from the patrol car noticed something strange. At 6:58 a.m., 11 minutes after Alice's 911 call, the camera caught a faint low-frequency hum. It wasn't the helicopter, that hadn't even launched yet. The sound grew louder for 6 seconds, then vanished abruptly. 2 minutes later, in the distance, a bright flash lit up the horizon, too quick to be lightning, too controlled to be sunlight. Technicians later enhanced the audio. The hum wasn't mechanical. It was rhythmic. Pulsing. Almost like something powering up, and then switching off. That night, the sheriff's office set up a perimeter. They treated the area like a crime scene. They photographed the tracks, took soil samples, scanned for tire impressions, even brought in cadaver dogs. Nothing. But at 2:14 a.m., one of the deputies on night watch radioed in something that made the sheriff drive back immediately. "Sir, you need to see this." Roughly 300 meters from where Tom's tracks ended, under a cluster of desert shrubs, they found something. A folded sheet of metallic foil, about the size of a dinner plate. It was smooth, reflective, completely unmarked, no fingerprints, no dirt, no creases. When the deputy tried to bend it, it flexed like rubber, and then instantly returned to its original shape. "This isn't aluminum," the deputy whispered. They sealed it in an evidence bag. By dawn, the FBI had called back. They were sending agents. Officially, Tom Wanders was listed as a missing person. Unofficially, the sheriff's office knew this was nothing like the usual desert disappearances. No body. No heat signature. No tracks leaving the scene. And now, a piece of material no one could identify, found just outside America's most secret military base. By the next morning, the lonely stretch of highway near mile marker 42 was swarming with uniforms. Nevada state troopers, FBI agents in black windbreakers, and Air Force personnel who refused to explain why they were there. Alice sat wrapped in a thermal blanket, staring blankly at the desert. She hadn't slept. An FBI agent gently approached her. "Ms. Wanders, can you walk us through exactly what happened?" Her voice cracked. "He just wanted to see the fence. That's it. He said he'd be right back." She described Tom as calm, curious, not reckless. He'd left with a flashlight, his camera, and a small bottle of water. He wasn't carrying a phone, he hated being trackable, ironically. The agents listened carefully, took notes. But when she mentioned the flash of light and the strange hum caught on dashcam, their posture changed. One of them stopped writing. Another leaned forward. "Can we get a copy of that footage?" The sheriff handed them a USB stick with the dashcam file. They played it on a laptop right there on the hood of a patrol car. The sound was unmistakable, low, pulsing, mechanical, but not like any aircraft they'd ever heard. An Air Force officer muttered something under his breath. The FBI agents exchanged a glance. By 11 a.m., the search area expanded dramatically. They brought in drones, ATVs, thermal scanners. Still no trace of Tom. Then, just after noon, a team found something. Roughly 1.2 miles southeast of where Tom's footprints ended, tucked between 2 rocky outcrops, they discovered a single shoe, Tom's left sneaker. It was perfectly upright, as if someone had placed it there deliberately. No prints leading to it. No drag marks. No blood. The inside of the shoe was warm. Almost too warm, like it had been sitting next to a heater. The desert sun wasn't enough to explain it. Forensics bagged it carefully. Alice broke down when she saw the photo. That's his. He never unties them like that. Never. But that wasn't the strangest part. On the shoe's rubber sole, investigators found a thin layer of residue, metallic, silver gray, and faintly magnetic. Laboratory analysis later showed it wasn't any common industrial compound. It contained trace elements not typically found in the Nevada desert, or anywhere nearby. The FBI quietly took over the case that afternoon. They told the sheriff's department to stand down and let the feds handle it. Officially, it was still a missing persons case. Unofficially, it had just become something much bigger. Meanwhile, Alice noticed something the investigators had missed. On Tom's camera, found still in the car, his last photo showed the horizon southeast of Tikaboo Peak. It was time-stamped 6:32 a.m., minutes before he disappeared. In the distance, faint but visible if you zoomed in, were 3 glowing orbs, evenly spaced, hanging just above the mountains. They weren't planes. They weren't stars. They were too bright, too symmetrical, and they were exactly in the direction Tom had walked. The FBI confiscated the camera that evening. They told Alice not to speak to the press, to avoid misinformation. But she knew something was wrong. The next day, a search and rescue volunteer found Tom's flashlight lying in the sand near a dry creek bed. It was switched on. The beam was pointing upward, toward the sky. Its battery was dead, but sand around it showed no signs of disturbance, no tracks, no scuff marks, nothing. Like it just fell from above, the volunteer said quietly. That night, local residents in Rachel, Nevada, the tiny town nearest Area 51, reported seeing lights in the sky. Not planes. Not flares. Silent, white, moving in perfect formation. By day 3, the FBI had stopped giving updates. The search teams were pulled back without explanation. And unmarked black SUVs began appearing along the highway. The sheriff had seen disappearances before, tourists lost in the desert, hikers underestimating the heat. But this wasn't that. This was different. This was organized, controlled, and off the books. 3 days after Tom Wanders vanished, the official search effort quietly fizzled out. The FBI left their mobile command unit parked near the highway but stopped answering the sheriff's calls. Air Force trucks moved in and out at night. No one said a word. Alice refused to leave. She rented a cheap room in Rachel, Nevada, the tiny desert town of conspiracy theorists, UFO watchers, and stubborn locals who'd lived next to Area 51 their whole lives. That's where she met Frank Doyle. Frank was 62, leathery skin, always in a trucker hat and dark sunglasses. He'd lived in Rachel for over 30 years. He wasn't impressed by FBI roadblocks or no trespassing signs. He sat down at Alice's table at the Little Ale Diner without asking. "You're the sister," he said. "Word travels fast here." Alice nodded cautiously. Frank leaned in. "You're not gonna find him through official channels. Trust me. They'll write a report, pack up, and pretend he never existed." Alice frowned. "Who are you?" "I'm the guy who's seen this before," he said quietly. 3 disappearances. 949903. All the same stretch of desert. All the same pattern. They wander too close, something happens, they vanish. Clean. No trace. She wanted to dismiss him as another conspiracy nut. But something in his eyes was deadly serious. Frank pulled a folded map from his jacket. He pointed to a cluster of dry gullies southeast of the Tikaboo Overlook. "This is where they always end up. Not their bodies. Their stuff. Shoes, flashlights, sometimes clothes. Perfectly clean. Like someone placed them there." Alice's heart pounded. That's exactly where they'd found Tom's sneaker. Frank warned her. "If you keep digging, people are gonna start watching you. Carefully. Don't go out there alone." That night, Alice sat awake in her motel room, replaying Tom's last photo in her head. The glowing orbs. The direction of the tracks. The strange material. Something didn't add up. She decided she wouldn't wait for the FBI. The next morning, she hiked out toward the dry creek bed alone. The air was bone-dry, the sun merciless. She followed a line of power poles until she reached the point where Tom's flashlight had been found. There was nothing unusual, until she noticed something half-buried under a bush. A plastic ID card, scuffed and faded. She wiped the dust off. Garrison, M., security contractor. Beneath it, a logo she didn't recognize. Not Air Force. Not FBI. But the strangest part, the photo was Tom's. Her brother's face, on a card that wasn't his name. Her stomach dropped. Alice rushed back to Rachel. Frank was waiting outside the diner. When he saw the card, he cursed under his breath. "I knew it. They tagged him." "Tagged him? What are you talking about?" Frank glanced around nervously. You ever heard of Project Sentinel? She shook her head. It's not public. Old contract program. Private security working with the Air Force. They pick up civilians who wander too close. Sometimes it's just a scare. Sometimes. He didn't finish. That evening, Alice drove to the county records office in Alamo. She bribed a clerk to let her check old incident reports. Frank wasn't lying. 3 unsolved disappearances between 1994 and 2003, all young men, all near the same perimeter zone. All with missing time between their last sighting and when their belongings were found. One report mentioned unmarked SUVs and civilian contractors arriving before local authorities. Another referenced metallic debris, unclassified. None of those details ever made it to the official summaries. Alice printed everything. Back at the motel, she noticed a dark SUV parked across the street. No plates. Engine idling. When she stepped outside, its headlights flicked on. She froze. The SUV slowly pulled away, disappearing down the highway without a sound. Her hands shook. Someone knew she was digging. By day 5, Alice was operating like an investigator. She had a folder full of printouts, a cheap secondhand camera, and a growing sense that time was running out. Frank agreed to help her one more time. After this, he warned, I'm out. These people don't play nice. They left at dawn, driving his battered pickup truck off the main highway and into a maze of dusty service roads that snaked toward the restricted perimeter. Alice stared at the endless tan horizon. There was something unnerving about the silence out here, not peaceful, but watchful. Frank killed the engine near a rusted gate marked with a faded, "No trespassing, U.S. government property" sign. We're about half a mile from where those disappearances cluster, he said. We walk from here. The desert heat was brutal, but they kept going. After 20 minutes, Frank pointed ahead. There. Half buried in the sand was a chain of metal pylons, each topped with a tiny black dome, like security sensors. They put these up around 2000, Frank whispered. Motion, thermal, maybe more. Step over the line, they know. Alice crouched near one of the pylons. She noticed something strange, fine metallic dust scattered in a narrow arc around it, like it had been discharged recently. Frank swore softly. That's new. They've upgraded. They followed the pylons for another 300 meters until they came across a shallow depression in the ground, roughly circular, about 5 meters across. At first glance, it looked like nothing, just a patch of disturbed sand. But when Alice knelt to examine it, she realized something. The sand in the center was melted into glass. Not scorched. Melted. Like it had been hit with intense heat in a perfect circle. Frank went pale. That wasn't here last year. Alice felt a sudden chill despite the desert sun. She snapped photos quickly. That's when she heard it. A low, pulsing hum, faint but distinct. The same kind of sound the dashcam had captured days earlier. It was coming from the sky. Alice's heart pounded. She scanned the horizon. Nothing. Then Frank grabbed her arm and pointed upward. High above them, barely visible through the glare, 3 lights moved silently in perfect formation. Not planes. Too smooth. Too coordinated. The hum grew louder for 5 seconds, and then, suddenly, the lights vanished. Alice stood frozen. Her hands were shaking so hard she nearly dropped the camera. Frank's face was ashen. We need to go. Now. They hurried back toward the truck, but halfway there Alice noticed fresh tire tracks cutting across their footprints. Someone else had arrived while they were at the glass circle. When they reached the truck, the passenger side door was slightly open. Frank's backpack was gone. Inside, tucked under the windshield wiper, was a single photograph in a plastic sleeve. The photo was grainy, taken at night, but unmistakable. It showed Tom, her brother, standing in the desert, alive, wearing different clothes than the morning he disappeared. Behind him, in the distance, loomed a set of bright floodlights and a structure that looked disturbingly like a hangar. Alice's throat went dry. The photo was timestamped 2 days after he vanished. Frank cursed. They're watching us. This is a warning. Back at Rachel, Alice locked herself in her motel room, blinds shut. She stared at the photo for hours. Tom was alive when this was taken. He wasn't lost. He wasn't dead in the desert. Someone had taken him. At 3:17 a.m., she woke to the sound of a car idling outside. She peeked through the blinds. A black SUV was parked across the street, lights off, engine running. Then her motel phone rang. She froze. On the other end, a man's voice. Come. Low. Alice, stop looking. Click. She stood there in the dark, her heart hammering. Someone was done warning. They were watching her every move. By the 6th day, Alice knew she had crossed a line she couldn't uncross. The photograph changed everything. Tom hadn't vanished into thin air, someone had taken him, and they wanted her to know it. She spent that morning making copies of the photo, the ID badge, and her notes. She left one set with Frank, another hidden in the diner freezer, just in case. Frank begged her to leave town. "Alice, you don't understand. When people get this close, they don't get warnings twice. They just disappear too." But Alice refused. She wasn't leaving without answers. That afternoon, she made a decision that terrified even her. She would drive toward the restricted perimeter one last time, and this time, she wouldn't turn back. The road was empty. The desert stretched endlessly in every direction. She kept the windows rolled down, trying to stay calm, but her hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles were white. A few miles before the gate, she turned off onto a dirt road. It led toward the cluster of pylons and the glassy crater they discovered the day before. This time, though, someone was already there. 2 unmarked SUVs were parked near the perimeter fence. 3 men in desert fatigue stood beside them, speaking quietly. No insignia. No name tags. Alice killed the engine and crouched behind a rock outcropping, heart hammering. Through her camera lens, she zoomed in. The men were unloading something from the back of one SUV, a metal crate, heavy, locked with coated latches. One of them checked a handheld scanner and nodded toward the crater. Then, without warning, the air was filled with that low, rhythmic hum again. Alice pressed herself against the rock. The hum intensified, vibrating in her chest. Above the men, the sky shimmered like heat haze, but there were no clouds. And then she saw it. Something, a shape, briefly materialized in the air above the crater. Huge. Silent. Triangular. It flickered like a mirage, then vanished again. The men didn't even look surprised. They kept working, calmly moving the crate toward the center of the glassy circle. Alice snapped a photo. Then another. On the third shot, one of the men turned his head sharply toward her direction. Her stomach lurched. She ducked down. Seconds later, the sound of engines roared to life. They'd seen her. Alice sprinted back to the car, adrenaline surging. She jammed the keys into the ignition just as headlights flared behind her. The SUVs were coming fast. She tore down the dirt road, sand kicking up behind her, heart slamming against her ribs. In the rearview mirror, the 2 black vehicles gained on her with terrifying speed. She swerved back onto the highway, praying for another car, a patrol, anything. There was nothing. And then, out of nowhere, the sky lit up. A blinding flash exploded above the desert, like a massive spotlight snapping on. The hum returned, deafening now. Alice glanced in the mirror. The SUVs were gone. Just, gone. She drove straight to Frank's place, shaking. He opened the door, saw her face, and didn't ask questions. They developed the photos in his back room, the old-fashioned way. Most came out blurry from her shaking hands. But one, the shot of the triangular shape above the crater, was clear. Frank stared at it in silence. "I've heard stories," he muttered. "But this is real." They decided to go to the press. But before they could, someone else arrived first. The next morning, Alice's motel room door was wide open. Her notes were gone. The photocopies were gone. Her car tires slashed. Frank's truck had been broken into, but nothing stolen, except the envelope with the negatives. On the pillow of her motel bed was a single object. That same strange metallic foil the deputies had found near Tom's tracks on day 1. Folded neatly. And beneath it, a typed note. "This is your last warning." Alice left Rachel that day. She never saw Frank again. The FBI officially closed Tom's case 6 months later, labeling it "lost in desert terrain." But she never forgot the photo. She never forgot the hum. And she never forgot the look on Tom's face in that grainy picture, the faint, terrified glance over his shoulder, like someone was standing just behind the camera. His body was never found. The metal sensors along the restricted fence were upgraded the following year. And every so often, hikers still report hearing that same pulsing hum in the night air. Near Area 51, where the desert swallow's secrets hole.